It's now my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. Stanislav Belikov, as he stated, is with the Russian Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, and he has also been a leading figure in international polar bear research, management, and conservation for over 50 years. The title of his presentation is Collaborative American-Russian Studies of Polar Bears on Wrangel Island, Russia, during autumn 2016 to 2019. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Stanislav. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you well. So I will begin my presentation devoted to collaborative American-Russian studies of polar bear on Wrangel Island in the fall 2016-2019. Below, you can see the authors of this work and Wrangel Island Nature Reserve employees, Washington University, Fish and Wildlife Service, and International Polar Bear Organization. All these people contributed to this work. Polar bear populate the circumpolar region, and there are 19 subpopulations. The total abundance is around 26,000 individuals. As you can see on this graph, the status of our knowledge on the trends in the abundance varies for some of the populations. Abundance is going down. For some of the populations, the abundance is stable, and also the stable ones are shown here, and increasing is in green. As far as the Russian part of the range is concerned, the trends can be decided only by the experts. We do not have any data on the central part of Russian Arctic, Laptev Sea, Kara Sea. We don't have data on the western part of Eastern Siberian Sea. We have a primary assessment of abundance. In Barents Sea subpopulation of polar bears, it was given in 2004 after the joint Russian-Norwegian studies. And back then, the assessment was 2,650 individuals. The Alaska Chukotka population, I will devote my further slides to it. And this slide shows to what extent the ice is shrinking in the Arctic. First of all, during summer and autumn period, but the trend is increasing. That is why, speaking about the threats for the polar bear, we want to emphasize the range countries that concluded the circumpolar action plan on polar bear conservation. And this circumpolar action plan, the major threat is global warming in the Arctic. And due to negative changes, and the ice habitats are also changing, which is the critical habitat for polar bear. Other threats, which is oil and gas exploration, fishing, and shipping activities in the Arctic. While assessing the prospects of polar bear survival, some of the colleagues even have a question whether polar bear will survive in this century. And harvesting is done for the subsistence hunting Canada, Alaska, and Greenland. These are the areas where polar bears are harvested. Alaska Chukotka population of polar bear, and our presentation mostly is devoted to this particular population The studies were done in the last 3 decades of 20th century. The assessment was given by the experts, just expert estimates, and this data, you can see it is based on a number of breeding females, and we used recalculation methodology. So we arrived on this expert estimation, 2,000 to 5,000 individuals. Updated abundance was done by our American colleagues, and based on research that was done in the recent decade, and the updated abundance, you can see 1,500 to 5,900 individuals roughly, and the data gives us a possibility to express an assumption that the polar bear group that I will describe later, it's in favorable status. And so we have positive signs in fatness and fitness of the animals based on the studies performed in the US in the spring 2008-2011. Although the autumn studies, they signal the rarely productive negative signs. Wrangel Island, this is one of the biggest homes for Alaska Chukotka population. Everybody know it. There is no need to proclaim that Wrangel Island is the biggest locus for reproduction, but this is one of the most important areas where polar bears are aggregating during summer and autumn time, and they use it for recreation, for rest, and when the sea is free from the ice in 2008-2013, based on our American colleagues' research and data, these tagging studies prove that polar bears, they spend by 1 month longer on Wrangel Island versus to 1986 and 1995. This is related to the ice cover reduction. Speaking about the joint studies performed by our US colleagues, studies were done on Wrangel Island, and it was focused on surveys and collection of all data whatsoever on polar bears. And for the specifically designated monitoring route encompassing the most important places and habitats for the polar bear on Wrangel Island. During the route, the people riding vehicles, and we recorded all possible information whatsoever that was available to them during this monitoring route execution. We recorded occurrence, the composition, the fatness and fitness, the behavior, relation with the fidelity to their vicinity, whether it's terrestrial or on the ice, and all data was recorded in the special form. This is the monitoring route I'm talking about, 2017, and we followed this route in 2018, 2019, and only in last year, and when only Wrangel Island performed this activity on polar bear, the route was supplemented by 2 more tracks, Rudelia and Red Flag rivers. So we extended a little bit of the route, but the length of the route is around 900 kilometers. These are the vehicles that we used, quadrocopters and SUV. And these are the vehicles enabled us to travel all the way through these 900 kilometers. And apart from collecting polar bear details, we also collected the hair of polar bears, samples using these kind of traps. And we placed these traps either in our areas where we based on, and or we came to the sites where the polar bears were spotted, and we collected the hair samples from these spots. The results part of the information that we collected during the monitoring is recorded on this slide, is shown on this slide. And we collected information on 1,601 individual polar bear and 586 reproductive detail. And this slide shows a number of sightings, the abundance of polar bears from 16 to 19. The biggest number was recorded in 2017, 586 polar bears. And to process this information, and we contacted with Wrangel Island Nature Reserve. We continue processing this data array, and this slide shows the organizations and stakeholders that contributed to organization and performance of these studies. And the last slide, the final slide, and we will continue joint research on Wrangel Island. We perform detailed analysis of all the collected data using the material that was obtained as a result of molecular and genetic studies. And special attention will be drawn to the global warming impact to the Wrangel Island polar bear subpopulation. So with this, I would like to stop. Thanks for your attention. Thank you, Stanislav.
Stanislav, I have a question regarding your presentation. I think it's a great presentation. Thank you. But my question regarding the land service which you perform on the Wrangel Island, do you assess the number or the abundance of polar bears on the route before you sight them? So is there some kind of scattering effect by the noise of cars or vehicles which you use? Maybe they scare them away. Answer, well, Irina, the polar bear response when vehicles approach, there's basically no reaction at all. They are more scared by the loud noise, and if they see a human on this quad, they could react in some way and they could be scared away. But I must say this reaction is different in different age groups. Most polar bears, among those which we surveyed, basically did not react to anything at all which happened outside. They did not react to this noise, they did not react to these vehicles. Maybe they moved to tens, maybe 100 meters, but they did not flee, that's the point. First, they were very interested, there's something new in their vicinity, and they wanted to check what exactly was that. But we did not see any trend for these polar bears be scared away. Thank you. I can see that Patrick has a question. Patrick, please switch on your microphone.
Thank you, Irina. This question is for Dr. Belikov. I wonder, with your expertise and Dr. Regeer's expertise in the latest population survey for Chukchi Sea polar bears, and given the remarks by Dr. Gustine of the limitations of monitoring the population on the US side, if you would be willing to speak to your advice for how to monitor that population moving forward into the future to meet our obligations under the treaty.
Thank you, Dr. Lemon. Stas, this is Eric. I'll start with a brief response to that and turn it over to you. Patrick, that's a great question. It's ironic that as the sea ice melts, it's generally bad for the polar bears, and it also makes it harder to study the polar bears. As you know, the estimate of abundance that we have for Chukchi sea bears, the recent one, was based on a live capture program in U.S. territory conducted on the sea ice in the spring. And working on the ice in the spring is becoming more and more difficult. So I think as Stanislav Figordovich said, Wrangel Island is really the place to focus as far as the most bang for the buck in future monitoring. I think that we had a sense for that several years ago, and there's a high level of importance to maintain that monitoring. There are more things we have to do. I think non-invasive genetic sampling along the coast, Chukotka, and potentially in the U.S. as bears spend more time there. And then, of course, the instrument-based aerial surveys that Dr. Khan will talk about. So I think it's a tough question, and we have to look at Wrangel Island and then some additional emerging methodologies to answer it. Thank you.
And I would like to add to what Eric has had, that your service, we believe you will continue, we hope you will continue service. At least we plan to continue this service on the Wrangel Island, and we want to expand this scientific work and to cover not only the Wrangel Island, but also the western population of the Chukchi Sea. We have begun studying it in 1990s, but then it was postponed and moved to the Wrangel Island. So we want to go back and study that population as well, but it requires a lot of efforts in terms of management, in terms of attracting financing and funding. And the point of this work would be to have specific boundaries between different populations. And for that reason, we would need to see the abundance of polar bears, then see their migration routes to get new information on their spread to the west. But we have problems in terms of logistics, in terms of financing. We still have to solve this problem. We hope that this work will be done in the future, though.